to that case involving Eddie Gallagher and those other service members who were being investigated for war crimes. And now the administration, I actually expect that they would own up to this, but they seem to just be changing their story about what exactly happened here and who was responsible for it, how.
Well, the Democrats, we already know they have Trump derangement syndrome. We didn't know they had another one, which is Hegseth derangement syndrome, because every time something they don't like happens, they come out and say he should resign, he should be fired. Look, we're taking out drug boats, right? They've done, I think, they killed 87 people doing this. Obama did hundreds, if not thousands, of bomb attacks all around the world in different countries on land, killing civilians at the time. Again, he was going after named terrorists, which is what we're doing there. It's Tren de Aragua is who we're going after. They're a named terrorist group. Yes, those are the Venezuelan gangs.
Are you sure about that?
Those are the Venezuelan gangs that run the drugs.
I don't know how the administration hasn't said that.
But there was an outrage when Obama was doing this all over the world. Hundreds and hundreds of times.
There was outrage, as I've pointed out many times on this show. But the question is, the question that I asked you was, if they want to change the rules of engagement and make it so that these types of attacks are allowed, why not just own up to it? Why are they changing their story constantly about what happened here?
Well, I don't think that people knew exactly what had happened because they weren't there on the ground.
They've had the video for months.
President Trump wasn't there. He wasn't there when this happened. Hegseth said he wasn't in the room when they made the decision. But by the way, they hit the boat the first time. They're obviously trying to kill the people on the boat. That's the whole purpose of bombing.
A few things. First of all, it's not Hegseth derangement syndrome to say that a former Fox News host shouldn't be leading the most powerful military in the world. Secondly, Obama had an authorized use of military force over a lot of these post 9/11 airspaces. He could do these strikes. But thirdly, finally, the Coast Guard has admitted they interdicted 212 boats since 2024 with no violence, nothing happening. And basically, 1 in 4 of those boats, 25% of those boats, had no drugs on them. So I want to ask you, would you be okay striking boats if there is a 1 in 4 chance that there's no drugs on the boat, according to the Coast Guard?
We have 60,000 Americans dying a year.
Do you want to answer my question?
No, I'm going to give you some facts.
No, you should answer my question.
You said there's no danger. We have 5,000 Americans
Wait, I didn't say there's no danger.
We have 5,000 Americans dying a month. We've killed 87 of them.
You know what's interesting?
This is
if Donald Trump cared about drugs,
why are you upset about it?
I'm not upset. I'm upset that Donald Trump claims to care about drugs, yet he pardoned the former Honduran president. And I have to sit across from you that claims Trump is doing this to take care and save Americans. When I ask you a question, I want you to answer. If there's a 25% chance that there's no drugs on one of these boats, are you okay with striking them?
Who said there's a 25%?
The Coast Guard.
That's at our border.
No, the Coast Guard.
That's at our border.
The Coast Guard
That's
said
not
this
off the border of
Rand Paul.
Venezuela. That's not off the border of Venezuela. We don't have the Coast Guard off the border of Venezuela.
Rand Paul subpoenaed the Coast Guard because they operate in the ocean.
They don't operate off the coast of Venezuela.
But they do operate in a space where these alleged drugs would be coming to the United States, which is actually not necessarily the case off the coast of Venezuela. We don't actually know whether this boat was coming to the United States. But let me get back to this idea of the idea of Pete Hegseth and his allergy to JAG officers. He wrote this in his book that this was an instance where he got a briefing from a JAG officer about rules of engagement. He said, after this briefing, I pulled my platoon together, huddling amid their confusion to tell them, I will not allow that nonsense to filter into your brains. Men, if you see an enemy who you believe is a threat, you engage and destroy the threat. That's a bullshit rule that's going to get people killed. And I will have your back, just like our commanders. We are coming home. The enemy will not.
Well, this is why I don't blame anybody who actually bought into the salacious, really explosive notions that were bandied about by the Washington Post. The notion that there was this no-quarter order that was given that would really reflect poorly on the Pentagon and open the Secretary of Defense and his subordinates up to prosecution. Those began to fall apart over the course of this week, in part because we had an act of Congress for the first time in a long time that sought actual information to clarify some of this stuff. We found out that despite Pete Hegseth's allergy, as you say, to JAG officers, they were there. They were providing real-time legal guidance. There's apparently this, as the Secretary said, he had subordinated this to the admiral who executed these strikes. They were debilitating the platform and not the people, which actually matters. This is why the administration landed on its feet today, because it doesn't have to argue now that this was a violation of Geneva Conventions, which does seem to be firm.
I don't know that that's...
What they don't have to argue about and what they don't want to argue about is the legality of the mission itself.
Well, I do think, you're right that Congress actually did something this week.
That's a good job.
That's
Okay.
important.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think that they've settled the issue of whether they, as you said, were taking out the platform as opposed to the people, because what was revealed in the briefing was that these men were clinging to the remnants of a destroyed boat. So the boat was destroyed. They were, it seemed, trying to save their own lives, which is not in and of itself a hostile act.
I mean, we can draw inferences from the fact that they had to use 4 Hellfires to neutralize this one boat. That's an
I don't know,
expensive
but
boat.
that's a different inference,
I
right?
just-
Like, I think it's a
still
question
think-
about
and
why
he
do we need
brought
to
up
use
something
that
I think is a
that kind
good
of
point.
ammunition.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but he brought up something that was a really good point, Adam. It's like, where are the drugs? Have we still been able to see them? And if, in fact, I'm reading today about whether or not we know if they've even made it here. These alleged drugs that you speak of, have they been here? Have they made it to the United States?
I would-
Yes,
my understand-
drugs are a problem here
My
in this
understanding
country.
is they briefed the Intelligence Committee in Congress that there were drugs that they've brought the drugs off these boats. So they have briefed them.
Okay, briefed, have we seen them? I don't think anybody has. And here's the other question I think is really interesting, what we're talking about, especially when we talk about this particular person. But it is about how, in fact, he operates as someone who is now in charge of this Department of Defense. I do believe there is some room for us to be concerned. At the very highest, his operational behavior scares me, and his situational awareness. To your point, he wants to change the way this is done, 100%. But is he going about it the right way? Should we be concerned? And the damage that he's doing now, what are the long-term effects? You bring up Obama, no one's going to argue that, but we're going to have to stay current. This is where we are
also-
today.
But I'm saying that the Democrats never complained when Obama was doing
We
it.
did.
That's my point.
People did.
Not really.
Absolutely.
Not really.
Hal, that's not true. That
No,
is
it's not
totally.
true.
No one called for
That's not
anybody to
true.
resign.
Hold on, Hal. That is completely false. Those airstrikes were so incredibly controversial that Obama was getting, incoming from his own party, from progressives. Major newspapers like the New York Times reported extensively on them, won the Pulitzer Prize for their reporting on those strikes. And yes, there are complicated legal issues about the AMUF that they utilized, about the targets, about whether or not the killing of those civilians was justified or not. Just like there are legitimate questions about this strike that I think actually could be cleared up if the Trump administration would actually be transparent. There is a video. They've had it for 2 months. They could release it immediately, and they aren't doing that. I think that's extremely telling.
Yeah, the video needs to be released. We need full transparency. And I also want to build on to something. When Pete Hegseth says that the rules of engagement shouldn't really matter as much, that actually puts U.S. troops directly in danger. Senator Tom Tillis had a really good quote. He said, "We have a lot of men and women who are at risk overseas and who will be over the next few years. When we lower the bar for the rule of engagement,
because he's
we are
acting like a
putting-
cowboy.
Yeah, when we're putting them.
it's
So what
crazy.
happens when a country just kind of arbitrarily kills some U.S. citizens and they use our defense as
Philosophy.
their defense?
Exactly.
Yeah, they use us as a pretext to do that.
Exactly.
There are a lot of places that export illegal narcotics. We could be going to war with a lot of places on the planet Earth if this wasn't a pretextual notion. And I would support what I believe is the text of what the administration is trying to do here, which is a regime change.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
This is a bad actor in the Western Hemisphere. He is the financial lifeline for Cuba, which has been a thorn in American sides all over the world for 70 years. It is the foothold in the Western Hemisphere for Russia and China. And they could say, listen, this is a geopolitical bank shot. We're trying to clear
Why
out
do
a
you
regime
think-
that we
why
don't
do you think
like,
they
but
won't
it's
say
far
that?
too close to the Iraq War.
Why do you
That's
think?
why they won't
you
say
think,
it.
or is it also because they're worried that they would actually then have to address their MAGA base, who they sold on this idea of not engaging in more wars? And even he was in the Middle East earlier this year talking about the failure of regime change. Wouldn't he have to explain that?
I think so, which is why they probably don't want to explain it. But it's easier to explain than expanding our national security policy to include drug importation and then calling that terrorism, which has a distinct legal definition and is frankly morally fraught. The notion that somebody who is a victim, whose loved one was a victim of terrorism, who was torn apart by a nail bomb, was shot so that somebody else could send a message to our political class, that's the same thing as somebody who willingly puts substances into their bodies. That's national security threat. You're going to have to explain that to Congress and establish a legal rationale for it. And if you do, it's going to open up the United States to a whole lot more theaters of operation than I think we've fully contemplated.
That's an important point. Next for us, though, the deputy director of the FBI says that he pushed baseless conspiracies in the past for money after his conspiracy about the DC pipe bomber falls apart. Plus, it's become one of Trump's biggest blind spots by he's calling the affordability crisis a con job.
When it comes to rules of engagement, I thought it was absolutely nuts in going to war with Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi people over there pertaining to Desert Storm and Desert Shield based upon premature evidence that he had bombs of mass destruction pertaining to having some sort of a nuclear bomb over there. I tried desperately, I do mean desperately, in stopping that engagement, stopping that theater event that went on, that costed I don't know how many lives. But what was even nuttier than engaging in that, under the rules of engagement, our sworn officers was not supposed to engage in battle unless they themselves were shot upon. Well, what if that person's a good shot? And what if that person that made that one or two shots took you out? You talk about being undermined. They immediately undermined our military compound organization complex whenever they started making up these stupid rules and regulations pertaining to rules of engagement. War is war. I've said this before, I'll say it again. There's nothing glamorous or glorious about war. And there will be, on both sides, to some degree, carnal damage. What we're dealing with here is a civilian life having to now become adjusted to a new way of military rules of engagement that obviously they don't like. Obviously they don't like. Now, I brought this up in one of my other recordings just a day or two ago. It has taken this long for the American people to awaken, to realize that we are no longer dealing with normalcy. We are no longer dealing with the same old pertaining to how that our enemy has become very, very clever in basically attacking our communities. It has taken this long before we realize that the enemy is actually from within. Why is the enemy from within? Because our people gave in to a bunch of nonsense, and I don't know if it come off the Geneva Convention Agreement after World War II, or if somebody just wanted to go in there and play around with people's lives. But it's the same thing towards what went on in the Vietnam War, of people going to war but wasn't allowed to win the war. Why are you going to war if you ain't going to war root, hog, or die? That's the whole purpose of going to war. And all this other crap going on pertaining to the Bushes, going all the way back to old man Bush, and probably even Reagan, I don't know. But whenever they get on national TV and they talk about war against drugs, it's nonsense in believing that we was going to war against drugs whenever our CIA officers was participating in the drug activity towards money being handled under the table. Our own people was portraying our own system that has caused our system to go belly up. It's kind of like whenever Bush over there would blow up a bridge, and here come Dick Cheney, that we would pay a company of commanders in a theater of blowing up something, and then we would pay Halliburton to go build it back. It was the most craziest, far-fetched thing that I'd ever witnessed in my entire life. And we got bought into that. Hook, line, and sinker. Today, now we're trying to make adjustments because of that mistake, and it's actually making us look like the villain versus the victim. Now, they talked about transparency. I'll get back with transparency in just a minute. Let's go back to this real quick.
Know who it was because it's either a connected anti-Trump insider or this was an inside job. This was a setup. I have zero doubt.
Fast forward to now, and a dose of truth serum, it seems.
I was paid in the past, Sean, for my opinions. That's clear. And one day I'll be back in that space. But that's not what I'm paid for now. I'm paid to be your deputy director, and we base investigations on facts. The difference between us and them is, we evolve. As information and new inputs come out, we can produce different outputs because that's what we believe in. We believe in facts and investigations guided by facts.
Look, it's worth noting that sources say that the suspect told them that he believes the 2020 election was stolen. That seems to be a very pertinent piece of information.
And it wasn't.
But I will
We
say,
know
let me
it
just
was
start by
not.
saying, the fact that this arrest was made with no new information, just existing information, it does raise a lot of questions about what was going on in the FBI over the last 4 years and why this was missed. However, I think Dan Bongino is telling on himself because he peddled a conspiracy that this was an inside job by the FBI, which it was not. And owning up to that, give him credit for that too. Owning up to it is important and good.
Abby, I don't know if we can give him credit for
if he
that.
meant to.
And I don't even think he meant to. I'd like to say, where in the world do they find this audacity? Is it underneath the couch? I mean, is it in between your pocket? The audacity is crazy. He was telling us straight up, without even thinking that he was telling on himself. I just want to do a quick little timeline because I was so interested because he was such a popular podcaster and was such a personality who runs everything. So when this first happened, as he just said, massive conspiracy theory. September 2022, on his podcast, he was like, I believe, and I have been told with good authority, that the person who's responsible is a connected anti-Trumper. And he said that it ultimately will be one of the biggest conspiracy theories in America. I'm fast forwarding because I don't want to go through all the hits that I have. Early 2024, still a podcaster. Again, the same thing. He has someone on for Revolver News who goes into why this is such a deep issue within the FBI, and it's a big critical problem because they are a massive cover-up. And then the last date, because I'm like, how do we get to this point? As recently as November 2024, January 2025, before he was actually appointed, he's still holding feet to the fire, saying the FBI needs to say that this is a corruption, and he would not walk it back. And he's saying he was paid to make up this
important for
story.
people who consume that type of
Information.
content to understand that they are being conned.
Correct.
That people are just making things up and selling it to them as fact. And then when they're in a position of power, kind of like the Epstein files, they then come out and they say, oh, oops, my bad. I was paid to just say things for clicks and for views. I mean, that is...
We should say, just
ridiculous.
for our own sake and for the audience sake, that this person is apparently giving conflicting answers to investigators, that he has said that he doesn't believe that the 2020 election was legitimate, but he's also said a lot of things that we don't know the details of, but it has apparently given investigators the assumption
Why
that's
do we
being
even tell the
conveyed in
audience
reports.
that? We're talking about this guy who's the deputy
because we
director.
don't want to do what Dan Bongino did, which is to establish...
This is what you get into whenever you get into a bunch of numbskulls that's wish-washy. They say one thing one day and they change their concept to being completely the opposite the next. Confusion. What does the Bible say about confusion? Satan is the author of confusion. We have been taken over by a spiritual entity here in America that if we continue on this path that we're on, this dreadful path, it could possibly be the end of America, the doom to us all. Why? Because of confusion. Because of giving out too many signals.
MAGA. They want to believe in it. They want to believe in. So now this guy has this entire, I guess he's a senior law enforcement official now, and now he's like, I'm getting paid to look at the evidence, and the evidence says, actually, I was wrong, but he won't even admit that he's wrong. And so that is my issue in the world that we live in, where we don't look for facts, that we just trust anything anyone says. And I believe that's why this administration is in the place that it is right now, and how this president got elected, running on conspiracy theories, and now we're saying, okay, it's not true.
I don't disagree.
No, my bad.
I don't disagree with
wrong.
any of that. I think we have a different perspective, though, in so far as I think this is an optimistic sign. It's sort of valuable to see somebody.
Once you plant a seed, this is the comprehension that I understand pertaining to being responsible for what you're saying. Once you plant a seed in the eyes of the people, and this is quickly and as much for me as it does anybody else. That seed goes out, kind of like a ripple. Whenever you throw a rock and you hit a pond or a body of water, the ripple goes out. During the process of that ripple, you don't know how many other people that's going to accept the seed that's going out, that it may be nothing but a pure mirror lie. It may be nothing but a pure mirror lie, but now you've done influenced all these other people of believing in that same seed. The seed of Christ was the seed of truth. It took a great long while before that seed finally started rippling throughout the world. Actually, it wasn't until 300 years, great mighty sacrifices was made just in spreading the gospel, and it wasn't until 300 years, I believe, if my history's right, pertaining to King Augustus, that finally acknowledged towards it being acknowledgeable, towards it being authentic. But even then, it took hundreds of years, and it wasn't until basically the Catholic Church done what they done, it wasn't until the Crusaders done what they done, it wasn't until that much more progress and sacrifice went on to be able to transfer or transmit that seed into other parts of the world. Today, that seed of truth, and I thank God for this, has probably inundated at least 98% of every human being on the planet. And it wouldn't matter if you was in Honduras, it wouldn't matter if you was in Venezuela, it wouldn't matter if you was in Africa, it wouldn't matter if you was just on a little island somewhere, it wouldn't matter. People has been exposed to the Bible. They've been exposed to the truth pertaining to Christ. Now, whether or not they want to accept that or not, that will be up to them. But getting back to transparency, getting back to the word transparency, this government over here on a local level has been one of the most untransparent governments in the world, because anytime the DA gathers up evidence, you got to be a special prosecutor or a special attorney to be able to go in and see the material that they have that's not on open public display. Why do they do that? Because they feel like that if they was to expose everything that they know about a particular case, that it would actually be counterproductive. That's the reason why that our amendmentary laws are what do they call it, says that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say, not most anything you say, not coordinatedly anything you say, not mysteriously anything you say, but anything you say can be used against you in the court of law. It goes back to the concept of the pen is more mightier than the sword. And if you'll follow that concept, who originated that, goes back about 1,000 years of these infiltrators, these buzzards, trying to sneak in into people's lives and dominate towards telling them what is right, what is wrong, what is fair, what isn't fair, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. It's all a part of dominating our lives. And whenever it gets to the point here in America that we have to rely on ourselves, pertaining to the civilian population, rolling up their sleeves and doing stuff like I done by going out to Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, staying on the compound there for about 3 days, and then going out to Oklahoma and doing my own independent journalist investigation. Whenever we have to rely upon the civilian population of bringing these things in order for the rest of the people to acknowledge that there was a cover-up or that what that they was doing was wrong, we are way out of focus pertaining to a government that claims that it's transparent. We don't even know today who actually killed JFK. This thing's been going on now for several decades, pertaining to who doing the people, or politicians lying to the people and saying, okay, if you elect me, I promise you, I'll fix that pothole in front of your house. I'll make sure that your road is one of the first roads that gets a new pavement asphalt on it. And then once they become elected, they not only hiccup on their promise, but take that same money that they could have used on that road, or anybody's road as far as that goes, and now they delegate it over into other areas. We've had a group of people that has been some of the most untransparent people that I've ever seen in my entire life. And whenever Donald Trump talks about the enemy being from within, he's absolutely speaking the gospel. But it's been kind of like hidden in plain view, because we the people aren't familiar with our laws, or aren't familiar with what is supposed to be deemed as being acceptable. Now we just accept whatever that they want to throw at us. And they know that. And you know what? You don't think that they've taken advantage of us that way? Sure they have. And it doesn't matter if you're a professor. It doesn't matter if you're a school teacher. It doesn't matter if you're a preacher. It doesn't matter if you're an executive of a company. It doesn't matter if you're a politician. It doesn't matter if you're an Einstein. They have swindled their way into society over here to the degree that we are only to shoot unless we are shot upon. And I don't know where that concept come from. I don't know if you can Google it. I don't know if Sarah will tell you, or whoever out those engines out there. I don't know if they can pinpoint just exactly what person done that. But it was kind of like what went on in the 60s towards them basically wanting to take In God We Trust off the dollar bill. That was discussed very, very heavily in the 70s, along with the computer, along with technology. In the format of discussing these things, it was discussed about privacy being violated once the computer comes on board. That basically, I'm going to use this for an example. Say you're an insurance company and you want to find out about this family of whether or not they have a low risk, a moderate risk, or a high risk towards somebody getting cancer or somebody developing some sort of disease because other members of their family members basically had the same type of scenarios. Well, that can make adjustments pertaining to insurance companies of whether or not they want to insure that person or not. That is a total violation of our privacy whenever you have people that can scrutinize our lives that way based upon basically our kinfolks and our DNA. Let's go back to this real quick.
It's much better with the Republicans.
Affordability issues are real.
We're here to deliver affordability and low cost.
I want to thank the leadership team who has prioritized affordability in this country again. We're also focusing on affordability.
We're all unleashed, single-mindedly focusing on affordability.
Affordability is always going to be an important point that the Republican Party needs to drive home.
But the president has gone to bat ever since he was elected on affordability.
You know, there's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. The word affordability is a con job by the Democrats.
So not only do prices and polls prove Trump wrong that the economy is not a problem for voters, but there has been more bad news this week. There were more than 1 million jobs lost this year. That's the most since the pandemic. And Republicans like J.D. Vance and Mike Johnson say this in response.
So I would tell everybody, relax, okay? Steady at the wheel, everybody. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fine, everybody. I mean, it might be fine, but I do think they're falling, as we've said many times, they're falling into the same trap that the Biden administration fell into. they benefited from that, but now they could be hurt by it.
Yeah, this is a show me, not tell me sort of situation. And if you were doing what the Biden administration's mistake was, which I think was to tell people that their economic circumstances are not, you're experiencing something that you shouldn't even believe your own eyes. Just look at the macro statistics.
Exactly.
It's transient.
It's transitory, yes, precisely. The Trump administration gives Democrats sound bites like the con job thing, which make absolutely no sense to me. But it's the show me part of this. I think they're doing a little bit better on that. And this week, the Trump administration got rid of the Biden administration's electric vehicle and emissions mandates designed to subsidize electric car purchases at the expense of the affordability of new and used vehicles that are combustion engine. That is going to have a real world effect. That is going to allow consumers more choice. More choice provides more options. That allows them to keep more money, put more money in their pockets that they can use to subsidize, or rather to patronize other more efficient businesses in the markets. That is how you reduce prices, by sending signals to the market that this firm is efficient and this firm isn't.
I have some.
First of all, I disagree with that decision. And secondly, I think the system is unrepairable. And right now, the bigwigs, the money people, they know that it's unrepairable, but yet now they're playing with our lives in trying to set this back or prolong this as much as possible. And the thing about it is, when it comes to the illegal drug activity going on all over the world, if they was to come together and changing the currency, changing the form of currency in how that we barter back and forth with one another as far as what we consider to be valuable. You know, we think that a $5 bill is more valuable than a dollar bill. We have been led to believe that a $10 bill is more valuable than a $5 bill. We've been led to believe that a $20 bill is more valuable than a $10 bill, and et cetera, and on and on and on and on. Until we change that mindset, we're just going to be like a bunch of dogs chasing after its tails, and we're going to be moving, but we're not going to be going nowhere whenever it comes to the drug lords, whenever it comes to the problem that's basically turned into an affliction here in the United States. Of now you've got generations of families that's being born into the world that are self-inflicted with these addictions, and they didn't even have nothing to do with the addictions, but because their parents did. It's awful. It's absolutely awful.
Regulation to fix up a place, to try doing that in New York. It's very difficult. You've got to reduce the regulations, and you've got to increase supply of housing. And you don't do that by having the government come in and go, hey, here's $50,000 here and here and here, and do it.
You also don't do that by taking a lot of people out of the workforce who build houses.
I agree that we need to increase the supply of housing, but everything else you listed, Trump is actively making worse. I mean, the ACA subsidies, they had a lot of chances to help people with health care. When it comes to food, beef is skyrocketing. Walking to the grocery store, everything is up, maybe save like eggs, but everything is up. Orange juice, I just read, was up 31%. And Donald Trump's tariffs are disproportionately harming low-income families.
No, they're not.
They absolutely are.
You can
Listen
say
to
that
this.
all day, they're not.
Like, lower-income families spend more of their income on consumer goods, and consumer goods are hit disproportionately by tariffs. It's super simple. It's regressive, not progressive. You can't say no, they're not, but you're just denying basic econ.
You're just wrong.
This is econ 101, dude.
I don't think he's wrong.
I'm not.
You know,
He is.
consumer
Look at the difference between progressive versus
the tariffs have barely been passed through at all. Those consumer prices are not up at the goods level. They're just not.
Let me just give you as an example, a cup of coffee. Okay, coffee prices have skyrocketed because of tariffs. Regular people who go to the grocery store, they buy coffee for their homes, are paying those prices. And you know why I know that it's the tariffs? Because the Trump administration then turned around and rolled the tariffs back to lower the price of coffee. However, I want to play this from Kevin Hassett, because he was confronted on Fox News, of all places, with numbers showing that people are losing their jobs in the economy. And here's how he explained it.
The flow of jobs in and out is a little bit higher. There's a little bit more turnover. A lot of times that could happen because people feel like they're actually able to get another job if they leave this job.
That could be an explanation, but I'm not sure it is the explanation in this moment. When we see the unemployment, the job...
People right now are desperate. They're very desperate, and everybody is striving towards trying to capture that brass ring in life. Well, right now, because things have been knocked around the way that they have, especially since COVID, everybody's wondering where the brass ring is. And of course, if you put an opportunity out there, kind of like what happened to my son, a temptation of going to Phoenix, Arizona, and picking up a concrete truck. It weighed about 55, 60,000 pounds, and bringing it back to Horn Lake, Mississippi, down below Memphis, Tennessee. Basically, at any given day, within 72 to 84 hours or whatever, he could establish that $20,000. You got people running for that brass ring. That was what my son was doing. Even his employers that he was actually working for at the time actually supported him going and doing that, because they looked at it towards, well, you'd be a fool not to do that. So yeah, we'll put the things that we got going on in our company on the back burner, in which I'm pretty sure now they regret, because they lost a top-notch employee. They lost basically a number one man in their team. But they actually supported him to the degree that they coached him in going out here and getting his own tax number and stuff. Said, well, if you're going to do that, you need to do this. You know? What's that based upon? It's based upon people being in dire straits. People basically being at their wits' end. People trying to survive in bettering their families' lives. And for a president to get on TV and just to absolutely lie about affordability should pretty well tell you what side of the fence that he's on whenever it comes to common sense and reality. Whenever they're bringing up all this crap about the election still being stolen, that was one of the things that was thrown into the pot along with COVID that has caused all the confusion. And until we, the people, take the reins back from these people that has gotten this country in this shape to begin with, we're only going to be seeing massive casualties on account of. And of course, if you'll add that with the attacks right now that's coming down, just as the Bible talks about, where Satan will come down in great wrath because he knoweth his time is short, in correspondence with the book of Revelations, if you'll bring that down pertaining to the natural catastrophes that continue to keep bombarding us again and again and again, not just here in America, but all over the world, now you have a recipe of catastrophe that is brewing around the corner. Then, to top that off, if you'll take what Russia has recently done in conforming their exercise emergency services that basically stifled our emergency services to the degree that we used to have, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes in being aware that they had shot off a ballistic supersonic missile and it was heading towards America. Because they have jammed our systems, we only have seconds now to realize that, my God, we have something coming at us. And it would fit under the same category in which, thank God for our meteorologist that has tried to fine-tune this ever since the 60s and the 70s, whenever the tornadoes got just absolutely rapid here in America. It used to be that people only had 4 to 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, to seek shelter, that there was a tornado outbreak and that doom and gloom was heading their way. Today, because of the analogy, because of taking this and looking at that and looking at that and looking at this and comparing it with that, now they can give more of an idea, sometimes as much as 48 hours in advance. 48 hours in advance. Prepare yourselves for impending doom regarding natural catastrophes. That's the reason why we have study teams that study not only storms, we study hurricanes, we study volcanoes, we study landslides. We study these things because we're trying to make our lives more safer and more predominant down here on planet Earth. Well, whenever you have people that contradict that and people that are taking those funds away from those services, now you're setting yourself up for a sure enough fall. I've recently put out a video that I got a hold of, I think it came out about a year or so ago, pertaining to the Delta down on the lower part of the Mississippi that is now basically deteriorating away. And if it ain't deteriorating away because of one purpose, it's deteriorating away because of other purposes. It seems like that everything that the Corps of Engineers has done down on the lower part of the Mississippi has been counterproductive towards it actually being part of the problem rather than it being part of the solution to the problem. That's added to the problem. But the fact of the matter is, I put out a statement years ago that the Mississippi River was going to begin to go dry. I didn't say it was going to go dry. I said it was going to begin to go dry. Pertaining to the analogy, looking at the Bible, the river Euphrates, according to the Bible, is going to dry up. According to the Bible, there's going to be like a 1,000,000-man army that the blood's going to get as deep as a horse's bridle. Well, use a little common sense. Whatever's going to happen that's going to cause the river Euphrates to dry up, don't you think it's going to cause the rest of the rivers and the streams to go through the same type of scenarios pertaining to the weather, becoming offbeat? If you get to looking at the major gaps that now we have instrumentation to be able to detect in the lower part of the water base of the Mississippi, we're understanding that there's more going on other than inadequate rainfall from year to year that's affecting the mighty Mississippi. And if the New Madrid Fault was to ever be released like it was, I think, in 1811, 1812 or something like that, basically going up and down the mighty Mississippi, it's a possibility. I'm not making this as a prediction, but it's a possibility that it could be so devastating that it could actually break one of the lakes. I don't know if it'd be Lake Erie, I don't know, one of the Great Lakes. It could break to the degree that if you had all that mass of water coming down the mouth of the Mississippi at one time, do you realize how many hundreds of millions of people's lives would be destroyed? Once more, we put study to these scenarios. That way we can kind of halfway prepare. That way we're not blindsided whenever it does occur. Now, there's no doubt we can't stop a lot of this stuff, but the fact of the matter is, I feel like that what we're doing in draining the oil out of Mississippi and Texas down into that region, we're creating a swamp hole, which was already a swamp, but now it's basically creating like a suction to the degree that it's sucking that ground down. I think they said we was losing a meter, 1 meter. I don't know if that was a month or a year. I'm pretty sure it was a year. Down in those areas, basically, of those swamplands, even become more swampier. Put something else together. Why these analogy people or these historical people get to looking at the Bible pertaining to prophecies. The Bible talks about that the earth is going to open up and that it will be great locusts that will come out of the earth that will sting mankind, that will be 7 times stronger than the stings of locusts. I mean, not locusts, but scorpions. 7 times worse than scorpions. That's going to torment humanity. First of all, a great deal of your teachers, ministers, theologians, whoever, they have taken so much stuff out of the Bible and wanted to politicalize it to the degree of saying, well, this is a metaphor and this ain't actually talking about locusts. How come it says locusts in the Bible? How come it talks about the sting that's going to be more severe than 7 times of scorpions? How come it talks about the earth opening up? What's going to cause the earth to open up? See, you got to put a little bit of common sense whenever you get to looking at things. And that's what motivated me in putting out a warning, an advisory, that the Mississippi River was going to begin to start to decline. And there's not as much commerce that goes up and down the Mississippi River today in one aspect pertaining to actual goods. But now there's all kinds of stuff that goes up and down the mighty Mississippi pertaining to oil. I mean, not oil, but coal and agriculture and other products going up and down the mighty Mississippi, that if the mighty Mississippi was to dry up, it would cost trillions of dollars extra. A matter of fact, it wasn't but about 4 years ago the Mississippi got so low that it affected the transport services to the degree that they was docking or penalizing farmers as much as $1 a bushel to make up the differences of them having to use other means other than putting it on barges going up and down the Mississippi and transporting their goods into other parts of the world. Now they was going to have to truck it into these areas, which was going to cost more money. So because of that, who took it on the chin? The good old American farmer. The good old American farmer. Now we're tired of taking it on the chin. We're tired of being lied to, and we're tired of only responding or reacting in having the right to fire only when fired upon. That's what's gotten us in this trouble to begin with. And when it becomes to transparency, these government agencies locally, it doesn't matter if you're in the state of Tennessee, or Kentucky, or Missouri, or wherever, towards Show Me State, are going to have to open up pertaining to their information base to the public, pertaining to public domain. And yes, it is open to public domain under certain circumstances that you got to be qualified or licensed to be able to go in there and look at that information about that particular case or that particular person. Our whole system needs to be reformed. Just like, and I know this is going to be a hard spot to swallow, a hard pill to swallow, just like our Constitution pertaining to the right to bear arms. Whenever our politicians sat down and wrote those policies, AK-47s and assault rifles such as machine guns did not exist. Did not exist. The closest thing that existed back then was a powder gun that you shoot one time, then it takes you about 2 minutes to reload and shoot again. Some of these policies need to be reformed in some aspect or another. And I'm not saying that we should take out the clause that everybody should have the right to bear arms, but it should be a certain type of arms. You see what I'm saying? A certain type of arms. Because if you put AK-47s in the hands of all your citizens, I guarantee you're going to be looking at a massacre. Because there's too many people out there that think killing is some sort of a game. They actually like to see gory, gooey stuff like that. They live off of it. They're sick. You got a bunch of sick people in the world. And if you hand over, it'd be the same difference. And this was one of the reasons why that I found out like 30 years ago. Well, why don't we use nuclear technology pertaining to putting in these car motors of people driving up and down the roads? That way we won't never have to worry about filling up our cars again pertaining to gasoline, using gasoline. Well, the obvious reason is this. You got too many mean people in the world, and if we was to have a certain amount of uranium in all these car motors, I guarantee you somebody would figure out a way of taking maybe 100 motors and bringing it together and basically creating a nuclear bomb. So you have to be very, very particular in who and what you disperse out to the general public. I understand the reason why the courts and the reason why the law enforcement agencies want to keep things, I'm going to use the word under wraps, pertaining to their knowledge that they have on a particular case. I understand the reason why that they do that, because it could compromise the case. And maybe that is the only way of going about structuralizing the successes in going after these bad actors, is to have that information limited in who can gain access to it. But when it comes to transparency, it's also counterproductive in what they're talking about pertaining to this is the most transparent country in the world. No, this is the most untransparent country in the world. And unless you get to looking at what they're doing and what they're not supposed to be doing according to the bylaws, according to our understanding of law and order, you're not going to be able to pin down what that they are doing or what that they have done to yourself or to myself unless you actually get to studying these things. It's kind of like Native American history. Why doesn't our schools, either through elementary or whatever, make it mandatory in identifying what actually happened to the Native American people over here? I'm going to tell you why. Because they're ashamed of it. They're ashamed of that particular part of our history. Same way, why wasn't there a lot of information given pertaining to the Spanish flu that hit in the early 1900s? I'm going to tell you why. After people got through getting over what they got over pertaining to how that they responded and reacted to other people, they was ashamed. And because they was ashamed, they didn't want that part of their life recorded, like it was going to be dissolved or like it never happened. Well, I got news for you. You got to take the good with the bad. I got news for you. Everybody has good qualities as well as bad qualities, including myself. The best that any of us can hope for is that our good qualities at the end of the day, at the end of our lifespan, will outweigh our bad qualities. Because we're going to have both. And if you're looking for a saint, somebody to walk on water, if you're looking for somebody to turn water into wine pertaining to being the founder of the Jubilees Jesus Christ Windmill Ministries missions, you're not going to find it. Because I'm going to let you know right now, I have lots of imperfections in my life. I'm working on those imperfections every day. Every day. I'm trying to draw closer every day to the Lord Jesus Christ. That way I can identify the things that I'm supposed to be doing versus the things that I'm not supposed to be doing. And I can make arrangements in reforming myself. But you got to want to do it. You got to have a desire to do that. And if you don't have the desire or the want tos in doing that, odds are you're probably not going to never change. You're not never going to reform. The same way with an alcoholic or somebody that's hooked on drugs pertaining to an addiction. You got to want to get off of it, not just talking about it verbally, but actually meaning it in your heart sincerely that, hey, these drugs are destroying my life and I want to get off of this stuff. If the want to isn't there, you can beat and bang, you can talk until you're black and blue in the face. You can send them to all the Alcohol Anonymous or all the Narcotic Anonymous schools every time the door opens up, and you're still not going to change that person. You know why? Because they have reached a level that they're unreformable. And that's the part that a great deal of the American people, especially Christian American people over here in America, has yet to accept, that we are at the level right now pertaining to our security, pertaining to law and order, pertaining to our safety. We are at the point right now that if we don't take on drastic measures, such as what we're seeing with this administration, we're not never going to be able to straighten this problem out, folks. I hate to say it, but we're not never going to be able to straighten this problem out. We're going to be just like a dog chasing after its tail. We're going to go around and around in circles towards moving, but we're not going to be going nowhere. Now, if that's what you want your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to be exposed to, continue to keep doing what you've been doing, which is basically sitting on easy street or being like an ostrich and sticking your head in a hole somewhere, out of sight, out of mind, hoping to God that it ain't going to affect you or your family. But I promise you, eventually it will affect you or your family, maybe not directly, but indirectly, coming near a neighborhood near you if it hadn't already. If it hadn't already. But the ideal of only shooting once shot upon is actually taking the concept away from a decent society in which, in some degrees, that has been violated in itself towards giving an officer the right to pull somebody over under suspicion. It's got to be reasonable suspicion. But whenever you take that right away from that officer, that they can no longer try to identify danger before it actually erupts and becomes danger, then we're basically a doomed society. We're basically a doomed society. we're going to have to conform. As I said earlier, whenever the Constitution was written, they had no idea about the drugs that was going to be unleashed into society. They had no idea that they was going to have military hardware out there that was going to be exposed to civilian life. They had no idea about these things whenever they wrote the Constitution. So does the Constitution in ways need to be conformed? Yes, it does. Like I said, you got the right to bear certain arms under certain conditions. If you're not qualified, you don't need to have an AK-47. You don't need to have an AR. You don't need to have an assault rifle the same as the military does. Because now the military or the law enforcement is basically overruled. They don't have nothing that's working in their favor. And that's what we're seeing. That's once more a prophecy that I had to give out that I didn't want to give out pertaining to a bloody road ahead. I didn't give out the prophecy in 2005, sending it to the 43rd President of the United States while I was in Davidson County, Nashville, Tennessee, of a bloody road ahead because I wanted to see a bloody road ahead. I don't think anybody in their right mind wants to see a bloody road ahead. But it had reached the level pertaining to how many people was coming against me. And I know what I was going through basically was a witch hunt towards basically being demonically attacked in people trying to stifle me, slow me down, hinder me, or entrap me. I know what was going on the whole time. Going all the way back to 1983, whenever I first identified that my life had been spared for a purpose. And it was a Heavenly Father that spared my life. But because I was talking about things that other people wasn't aware of or had never been taught on, not only was they ignorant, but now they was adding insult to misery by saying, well, because this person believes this, we're going to declare this person as being manic depressive. Or we're going to declare him as being this. We're going to declare him as being that. Well, who's done that? Who's brainwashed the people that way? Your psychiatric community. Communities all over America. And your liberal judges and your liberal attorneys has allowed for this to happen. Friends, we are at our wits' end. And if we don't start doing things differently, I promise you, it's coming near a neighborhood near you. Now, you can continue to keep avoiding, ignoring people like me, or you can start listening to some of the stuff that I'm talking about and people like us are talking about, as well as Al Gore. Because I promise you, the damages that is being done all over the planet right now is due to the fact of the way that we're sucking the very nutrients out of the earth and not replacing it back with something. We're leaving big crevices and holes in the earth. And no wonder Louisiana and the places down there of the Delta and the swamplands are basically being destroyed. They claim that New York City alone is dropping on average an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches every year. Why? Because you have put all that concrete, all that asphalt, all them people in one particular area that was not designed to hold that area. Okay? Naturally, because of the weight distributions, you're going to have a reflection up onto that area. Kind of like what I was listening to last night that I had never given a whole lot of thought of pertaining to the pyramids. Why do you think God created the pyramids? Well, according to what I was listening to last night, that did have a theory in behind it. It did make a little bit of sense regarding the offset or counterbalancing the earth because it had lost its momentum in its original form of the way that it cycled. They claim this year, right now, we're in a cycle of going further away from the sun than what we ever have. And because of it, we're going to be bombarded this year by extreme winter weather. You know what? I don't doubt that. You know why? Because whenever you start redispensing the weight load of melting the poles, and now you're taking that weight load off of the North Pole and the South Pole, and you're putting it in other areas of the world, you're going to cause the Earth to change form in the way that it rotates. We're a ball spinning in space. Okay? If we get like 200 million miles closer to the sun, we all fry to death. If we go 200 million miles away from the sun, we all freeze to death. We're hanging just on a wing and a prayer. And if we don't start to analyze what we're doing to ourselves, how about all the chemicals that we're putting on agriculture pertaining to all the chemical runoff? You know, I'm going to use this real quickly for an example to where maybe you can understand it. They've been working out here now for probably about 2 months, off and on, towards bulldozing stuff and doing land conservation. Well, why are they doing this? They're doing this because whenever I first come down to Tennessee in 1966, first of all, the majority of all that field right there was all woods. Second of all, that low-lying area that you're seeing right there, this low-lying area, it wasn't that low. It wasn't that much of a low-lying area. There was a low-lying area, kind of like a big ditch, but not like it is now. It's basically turned into like almost like a trench down through there that has taken all that soil and put it down this big gully or ditch, and that ditch goes all the way down to the bottom, and then it goes beyond the bottom all the way to the water in the mouth of the Mississippi, mouth of the Obion River. Same way over here, you got a ditch line that goes all the way down. Where does that water and where does that land go? It goes down into the bottom and then into the water system. Well, guess what else is going into the water system? Roundup. Any type of poisonous agriculture material that we put on top of the ground, because of the runoff, it goes down into the water. If it goes down into the water, guess where our aqueducts gets its supply from a lot of times? From runoff. That's what keeps the aqueducts filled up. And I guarantee you, if we was to have a real dry drought year, the reason why I know this, in 2007, they was actually having wells drying up around Robinsonville, North Carolina, and up in the Smoky Mountains. Because why? Because lack of runoff. They was having people's wells dry up. Well, those wells, if you look at the cycle towards the harborsides that goes on top of the ground, that winds up going into our water system, that is what is giving everybody cancer. That is the reason why people's health is declining. Now, if you go back to Bible prophecy again and look at what has already been prophesied, there's different degrees of awareness that comes about regarding the book of Revelations. That the first degree, that it says, I will throw thee off into a sick bed. A sick bed. That's where we are right now, folks. We're in a sick bed. And we're getting sicker, and we're getting sicker, and we're getting sicker. Though we build more nice hospitals, though we have smart, intelligent doctors, and etc., we're all being thrown off into a sick bed. What's the next level beyond the sick bed? Great tribulation. We are doing this to ourselves, and if we're not smart enough to identify these things, I guarantee you it's just a matter of time coming near a neighborhood near you that we will be thrown off into Great Tribulation. Great Tribulation is going to be unlike anything that the world has ever seen. You think that you're going through hardships today pertaining to the problems in your life, but you ain't seen problems regarding the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation is going to be brought on by mankind, but once it reaches a level of instability to the eyes of God pertaining to the world, that we're basically doomed anyways, that's whenever the Father will step in, and he'll basically like create this mercy killing, like he did during the Great Floods and like he has during other generations, thousands of years before us, that basically he'll come back in flaming fire, taking vengeance upon them who know not him and upon them who obey not the gospel. And any structural house or building or business that's burnable will be burnt. Where's all the smoke going to go? It's going to go up into the atmosphere. And we're not just talking about one or two houses. We're not just talking about a community or two. We're not just talking about the fires like we've seen out in California or in Hawaii. We're talking about all over the world. Where's the smoke going to go? It's going to go up into the atmosphere. Once it goes up into the atmosphere, what is it going to do to the sun? It's going to darken the sun. The sun is going to become as darkened as sackcloth, indicating that the sun will still be up there, but it will be like looking through a smoke screen or something, you know? And of course the moon, shadowing it through, or channeling the vision through all the smoke, will make the moon look as red as blood. In addition to, there's some sort of mineral on the moon right now that is actually taking form, that is changing, kind of like copper, that's turning red even as I speak. So everything that has been predicted that's going to happen is happening. And why we don't try to reverse the consequences of these things is beyond me. And I've always stood with our United States military, and I'll continue to stand with our United States military as long as what they're doing is under the rule of law, in freedom, in the aspect of democracy. Always. Always have, always will. As long as that is their primary objective in doing what they're doing.
I just believe that it is a duty at this moment to keep on fighting the cartels, fight the Soles cartel, and now it's Maduro, because I think that's the most important objective, thinking on the whole security in the region. And let me just also say this. I think the best legacy that President Trump can contribute in defense of the democratic charter of the Americas is that working with all these administrations that defend democracy is that by the end of this term, we don't have more dictators in Latin America.
You know, the politics are slightly changing in a wave across Latin America. They're becoming much more conservative than perhaps they were a few years ago. Do you think that's part of it? And by the way, when you say you hope the U.S. can remove dictators, as you know, the U.S. historical experience with intervention in Latin America has been to introduce and to prop up military dictatorships.
Well, you know, Christiane, I think we've all learned from the historical lessons. And I think when you mention about this ideological changes in governments, I think more than ideological, I think people have realized that populism, demagoguery, and also polarization just for the sake of winning elections is not working. And that's why people now prefer no more demagogues, but more pedagogues that will tell the people that in order to accomplish results, we all have to contribute, and we'll have to contribute with sound policies, with sound government, and technocratic administrations.
Coming up later on the show.
Now, if you took notice years ago, whenever I was driving around my vehicle that said oligarch on the hood of it, it didn't say Russian oligarch. It didn't say South America oligarch. It didn't say China oligarch. It just said oligarch. You got powerful, wealthy, rich people all over the world. Some of them are open oligarchs. Some of them try to do it in a more secretive type way. But the fact of the matter is, whatever system that you're under, the American system, the Russian system, the China system, it protects those oligarchs to a certain degree that basically they can get away with almost murder compared to the average old Joe can't get away with nothing. Going back to what you just got through looking at that's going on in behind my house pertaining to conservation. Land, wash, conservation. They are doing that in building levees to try to prevent that much more loss of ground and that much more poison material going down into our water systems. It's a preventive form. It's the same way that you take your automobile and you have your oil changed every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, is that if you didn't do that, eventually you would be asking for trouble down the road. It's the same thing as whenever you go to a dentist and you have a cavity fixed before it ever turns into something major, to the degree that now you got to have something else done. It's all preventative measures. In identifying what we're doing to this planet by draining the natural resources out of the ground, if we don't take drastic preventive measures, as I said 4 or 5 years ago, that if we don't go green, it's going to get mean. And that's exactly what we're seeing again and again and again, as far as Mother Nature becoming that much more brutal and going from one extreme to another, going from being entirely way too hot from entirely way too cold, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is all a confusion state, natural state, regardless whether it's Mother Nature or confusing state of mind pertaining to keeping everybody messed up and confused. And unless you're willing to look at the problem and identifying the problem as it being a problem and then engaging in trying to change the problem, you're always going to have the problem. It's kind of like they claim that the first sign of insanity is to continue to keep doing the same thing in hopes of going to change the circumstances. You're not going to change the circumstances if you're not willing to change whatever that you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're an alcoholic. It doesn't matter if you're on drugs. It doesn't matter if you're hooked on laziness. It doesn't matter if you're hooked on being dishonesty. It doesn't matter. If you're not willing to reform, then you're going to continuing on the same path that you're on. I just hope and pray that we as sovereign citizens of this planet, that we have enough sense to identify the things that we're doing to ourselves in making these changes. Now, does that mean the United States government, pertaining to our military, has the right in doing any and everything that they want to do in any way that they want to do it? No, it does not mean that. If anything, it means that we need to engage in monitoring what our CIA officers and our Pentagon military strategist does, regardless whether they be too much or too lenient. I think we've been too lenient, and that's one of the reasons why that we've been inundated by all these drugs coming over here to America that's destroying individuals' lives and destroying our communities. But we're going to have to be able to talk about these things. We're going to have to be able to be open in transparency in being able to discuss these things if we're going to ever get a handle on the problem. Because it is a problem. And it is affecting people's lives all over this planet. It's become more of a problem. It's a crisis. We are right now in the middle of a crisis. And it's a bad one on almost every level you can think of.
And in vivid technicolor, when President Trump's main negotiators this week again went to the Kremlin, hoping to finally move Putin to the negotiating table. They failed after a marathon wait for Putin to meet with them, and then marathon talks that produced no agreement. As European allies and Ukraine say, hope needs to be backed up by serious, well-planned, lengthy negotiations. So it was a poor omen this week when, for the first time since 1999, the U.S. Secretary of State did not attend a NATO strategizing session in Brussels. Julianne Smith was a U.S. ambassador to NATO under President Biden, including during Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. And I asked her how this peace ball was ever going to move down the pitch. Ambassador Smith, welcome back to our program.
Thank you.
How important was this NATO meeting?
Well, look, NATO foreign ministers come together about twice a year for these very high level and important meetings. And essentially, for almost 4 years, the chief topic at these meetings when foreign ministers gather has been Ukraine. And no doubt, the allies were hoping that they would have a chance to sit down with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and get his update on where we are after the meeting in Moscow. Rubio opted not to join the foreign ministers meeting. Instead, he sent his deputy. This is extraordinarily uncommon for the United States to do so. And they were peppering him, I suspect, with a lot of questions about where things stand.
So here's from the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. This is a quote from his press conference after the NATO meeting. He says, "We're ready and willing to do what it takes to protect our 1 billion people and secure our territory." This is after this from Russia, from Putin. Just take a listen to this.
We're not planning to go to war with Europe. I have already spoken about this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly wants to go to war with us and starts, we're ready right now.
Do you believe Putin when he says we never want to go to war with Europe, but if it happens, we'll be ready?
Well, I found that statement to be disturbing. It seemed to be a very thinly veiled threat that Russia is at the ready and possibly willing to try and touch NATO territory. What we do know is that Russia has spent years, decades, trying very hard to erode allies' commitment and faith in NATO's Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. We've seen a number of sabotage events in recent years. We've seen incidents where drones have flown into Polish airspace. We had the incident with Russian jets flying over Estonia. These are classic plays on the part of the Russian playbook. They are designed to divide the alliance, to chip away at the unity that exists inside the NATO alliance, and to create uncertainty and insecurity across the entire European continent. And so when I hear the statement that Putin made, in some ways it's not altogether surprising, but it should worry Europe quite a bit in terms of how Russia is positioning itself to possibly touch or invade or intervene in NATO territory, which I hope never happens, but I don't like the sound of what we heard yesterday from Putin.
Do you think NATO has the wherewithal, and Europe particularly, to actually confront or stave off any kind of Russian misadventure inside Europe?
I do think the NATO alliance has what it takes to defend NATO territory against a Russian conventional intervention of some kind on NATO territory. I do believe that cannot be done without the assistance of the United States. Europe is, as you well know, investing eye-watering sums of resources.
Did you understand what I said to you a while ago? This new invention that Russia has put out in limiting our response time, that wasn't just engaged into the American frontier. That's engaged into every other country in the world. Limiting, going from minutes to seconds in detecting that a supersonic missile is now pointed and coming your way. You don't have to be an Einstein to figure out why that they have invented this and are now using this. That set off alarm whistles all over the world. You don't have to be a military strategist to sit down and say, why in the world would they have done that? I'm going to tell you why. Because they feel like that they're being pushed more and more into a corner. Because they've done already admitted, going into the Ukrainian war, that they feel like that they have been cheated. And in actuality, because of what certain people didn't do over here in continental United States on a gospel religious scale pertaining to prophecy, they have been cheated. Not only have they been cheated, but every other person on the planet has been cheated because they have set back one of the greatest known events that has been promised to the Christian society pertaining to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, pertaining to the rapture. They have put it on hold, beginning right here in Northwest Tennessee. That in actuality, we should have already been taken out of this hellhole down here. But instead of us being taken out of the hellhole, now the hellhole is turning into more of a hellhole. And people like the Russian oligarchs can see this. And because of it, they are balancing out the differences in identifying the dangers that are no longer acceptable in their eyes. Once more, they feel like that they're being cornered into something by not only NATO, but by the continental United States, as well as other areas out there that they're unsure of. Anytime you have uncertainty, now you have fear. Anytime you have fear, now you have probability. They claim whatever you do, you don't want to confront a person that's holding a gun against you, that's sitting there shaking. Their hand is shaking, or their whole body is shaking. Because fear has already done emotionally taken over that person's body. And that person could shoot you and not even identify subconsciously that they're going to shoot you. But because fear has overridden their emotions, now fear is their life source. Fear is a contaminant. That's the reason why, if you go to reading the Bible, it says again and again and again, fear not. Fear not. Not hundreds of times, but thousands of times it's in the Bible. Fear not. Fear not. Fear not. Why? Because fear can be a contaminant in being that conduit between yourself and God. There's so many promises of the Lord that could have been demonstrated through various human beings if they would have just put aside their fear. Or, better than that, put aside their superstitiousness. I feel like that superstitiousness has been a big contributing fact of the reason why that the Jubilees Windmill Ministries never took off the way that it should have had going back into the late 80s, early 90s, is because people was too superstitious around here. Well, what caused them to be superstitious? Well, let's look at some facts. Let's look at what went on pertaining to the Civil War, pertaining to Nathan Bedford Forrest filling their heads full of ideals towards thinking that black people was monkeys or they wasn't even humans. Then let's look at another factor around here pertaining to the Night Riders that existed over in the Reelfoot Lake District area, pertaining to a bunch of bad people that claimed that they had good intentions, but it wasn't until the governor intervened in stopping them because they was taking pleasure in the things that they was doing. Then let's look at another concept pertaining to what went on with the earthquake. Let's look at another concept pertaining to one of our pioneers, pertaining to Davy Crockett, that tried to motivate the people around in this area towards standing up for their rights and going and fighting down on the Mexican border. Him and Sam Houston and the rest of them during the days of the Alamo. Superstitiousness. I understand the reason why that our nation has become very superstitious because of the things that's went on in America, going all the way back to basically Jim Jones or other predominant spiritual acquaintances out there that has misled or misguided the people. But you also got to look at some of these other bigger ministries like Orlando. I'm trying to think of the name now. Come out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's been other ministries such as Jimmy Swaggart's ministry that got caught with a prostitute. There's been, Joel Osteen ministries that whenever they had a hurricane that flooded out all the areas, they wasn't going to allow for nobody to come in at first to to their big coliseum, other than the people that was members. I can identify the reason why people are superstitious. I can identify that, the reason why that they're this way. But for surely to God, you can outweigh the differences between being superstitious and the negative approaches that we're on right now towards seeing the doom and the gloom that is right around the horizon. And what has caused this? Fear. Fear has caused this. Uncertainty. Going back to that is one of the predominant bases that has created wars. And in today, in the information digital era that we're living today, it would only take one little offset, whether or not it was an intentional or unintentional, pertaining to a bloop or a breach of security that would throw either America or Europe or Russia or somebody over the edge to the degree that they would start opening up their silos and start firing off these mushroom bombs that could actually resonate into an all-out and out nuclear war that could resonate into the end of survival, in the end of survival as we know it today on planet Earth. Now, friends, if that's the direction that we want to go in, continue to keep going in the direction that we're going. Because I promise you, that's the direction that we're going in. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless those who are truly trying to do the proper and right things in the eyes of God and in the eyes of all of mankind's safety and security up onto the planet.
Pope Leo prayed for peace there.
I ask the international community once again to spare no effort in promoting processes of dialogue and reconciliation, and make a heartfelt appeal to those who hold political and social authority here and in all countries marked by war and violence. Listen to the cry of your peoples who are calling for peace.
This week, in a historic meeting, Israel did send representatives to Lebanon for the first time in decades, while at the same time signaling that will get even tougher if Hezbollah doesn't take steps to disarm soon. CNN's Ben Wheeler.
Anyways, God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless those who are seeking the Lord's will and way. God bless America. God bless our endeavors. And God bless the Holy Eternal Father, pertaining to thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And shalom.